I'm Tammy Dunnett, ex-Target workplace bully turned communication coach. But it wasn't that long ago when I lacked the skills, the tools, and the knowledge to ditch the drama, confidently handle difficult conversations, and create better relationships. Fast forward past many failed attempts and lessons learned, and you will see the business that I have today. One that is helping others just like you to find the confidence and peace knowing you can change your circumstances one conversation at a time. I created the Dissolve Workplace Conflict Summit to give you access to industry leaders who are sharing simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies so you can do the same. If you are an employee, supervisor, or an employer and you are looking to access the top strategies to successfully dissolve conflict without damaging your relationships, then you, my friend, are in the right place. Today, I want to introduce you to Chris Hadnagy, Chief Human Hacker. He is the founder and CEO of Social Engineer. During his 16 years in the information security industry, he has created the world's first social engineering framework and newsletter, as well as hosted the first social engineering-based podcast. Chris is a well-known author, having written 5 books on social engineering, and his most recent book, hot off the presses, January 5th, and why we are here today, is Human Hacking: How to Win Friends, Influence People, and Leave Them Better for Having Met You. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you for having me, and I love that introduction, by the way.
Thank you. You know, you're just a fascinating person. When I first came across your information, I'm like, I've got to have you on this summit because, I mean, dissolving conflict takes so many different perspectives, and you have got a very interesting take on it.
Well, it comes, I think your intro, why it fascinates me is it seems like we have a similar path. Through many, many failures came understanding of how to potentially do it right sometimes.
Well, the stories in your book definitely highlight some of the learning processes, and I want to talk about some of those. But I first want to help people understand what is social engineering and how does that connect with human hacking?
Sure. So if we just go back in time, like, 15, 16 years when I was starting all of this, and you looked up social engineering, there was very little information on it. And it was some stories about Kevin Mitnick, who was a very famous social engineer, but he got arrested because he social engineered the FBI and some phone companies and got caught and ended up going to prison. So there were stories about him. There was stories about how to get free burgers from McDonald's and how to pick up girls. And that was it. But yet some of us, and me being one of them, was using this in what we call adversarial simulation. So we were getting hired by companies to audit them, and we were bypassing security protocols, just asking questions or walking up to a security guard. So I said, I have to define this more because it was more than just like street magic or pickup artistry, which is silly in itself. So I came up with a definition that social engineering is any act that influences a person to take an action that may or may not be in their best interest. And social engineering often gets applied to cybersecurity or InfoSec, but it applies to human hacking because the same principles that we see con men use or scam artists, when you use them for the good, so when you use those same things but without malicious intent, you can have amazing results in communicating with people, and it could be mind-blowing what you could accomplish with those same exact skill sets.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I came across when I first saw you on, it was a TED talk I think you were giving. And it was actually all about phishing and emails, but I was so drawn into the fact that you're using these behavioral pieces of knowing what a human would respond to and not respond to change their behavior.
For me, one of the things that like the hacker mindset is that when you find something, you want to know how it works, because you can't really figure out how to alter it unless you know fully how it works. So when all of these techniques started working, what frustrated me was I didn't know why. I would call somebody and say I was Paul from IT and ask for a password, and they would give it to me. And I'm like, why would they do that? It doesn't make sense. So I started reading books on psychology and nonverbals and body language and influence and persuasion and manipulation. And every time I read something, I went, wait, I did that last call, but I didn't know it. And I would highlight it, write it down, and then try it again and go, now I know why it works. So for me, what happened, and I think this was just the way that this then became an industry, is I wanted to understand psychologically and scientifically why these things worked. Because how can you fix the problem, any problem, unless you know what the root cause of it is? Because in communications, what I have found oftentimes when something goes bad, we go, it probably was that person. They didn't reply right, or they didn't respond right, or they didn't hear what I really meant.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always blaming the other person. It's easy to say, well, Tammy just didn't get what I meant.
Yeah.
And now it's your fault that our communication went bad. But if you're self-aware and you understand the psychology, you can go, wait, I know it because when I said this, I saw that her face got angry and I must have said something wrong at that point. And that helps you be more self-aware about how to communicate better.
That's such an important point. I think
And
self-awareness is lacking in a lot of our confrontational messaging that happens. We've already, in some cases, a lot of your work here has been with strangers. You don't know them. You don't have that time to get to know them.
yeah,
And sometimes the stuff I'm dealing with is conflict in a workplace where we already know each other and we should have some sort of pretexting is where I want to talk about that.
yeah.
Kind of like getting into that, setting the stage so you can be successful in this relationship. So you're going from a cold start, and I'm working with people who already know these people. So talk a little bit about how you've used. I'm jumping right into pretext. I might be
That's
going over
fine.
where you want to go, but
Hey, we could go anywhere you want. That's perfectly fine. You're the
um,
boss.
well, I like that. Thanks, Chris.
You're welcome.
I just found it fascinating when I got into that chapter about preparing. I mean, you have a whole synonym for prepare, but pretexting is the very beginning and it's so important. Can we just talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So, from a social engineering angle, pretexting is basically deciding what is the act that I want you to believe when I walk up to you. So, if I say, okay, Tammy works at this building, I need to bypass her because she's the gatekeeper. So, I'm going to be a pest control guy. Let's just use that. Then that's part of the pretext. But there's something so much more to that. It is the outfit, the clothing, the tools that I have, the other artifacts that will say to your brain, hey, this guy's a pest control guy before my mouth opens and says any words.
Mhm.
Because as long as I could prove it to you beforehand, then your brain will automatically accept the words that come out of my mouth. Where if I walked up to you in a three-piece suit with a vest and a tie and I said, I'm the pest control guy, you go, what? Like, it doesn't make sense. So the appearance and everything is part of the pretext. Actually, I wrote this down yesterday. It's a fascinating thing you brought this up. One of my employees, I asked her to describe pretexting, and this was her definition. Pretexting is the narrative where you are the tiny detail. And I
Oh,
thought, oh, isn't that beautiful?
that's big.
Right. So now think of it out of social engineering. Let's use conflict resolution. And I'm going to use one that is familiar to me, being a father. So I have a problem with my daughter. She is mad at me, right? For whatever reason. She's 16, teenager. Now, my pretext, I have two potential pretexts because I'm going to go talk to her about this.
Mhm.
Angry dad or empathetic dad. Now, everything that, again, that if I'm the tiny detail, then that means everything that I say, look like, appear needs to prove the pretext. So if I'm empathetic dad, I can't go in like, we need to talk, right? And I
Mhm.
can't have the
Mhm.
body language of
Furrows,
stiffness,
yeah.
right? I can't be furrowing my brow. I have to go in and be like, hey, can, open ventrals, like this. And I have to have my conversational signals up and gravity defying gestures and be like, hey, can we spend a couple of minutes talking about that last disagreement? Empathetic dad will get a much better response in the scenario. So I have to commit to that pretext. Now, part of pretexting that is always so hard for people is what happens if it doesn't go the way you want.
Mhm.
So now I do that. Empathetic dad, hey, can we talk? She's like, no, I'm mad at you. You're a jerk. Do I then to just get rid of my pretext and become angry dad? No, because pretexting, if you fail to do it, that's where you break trust.
Yeah.
So I need to say, well, I'm going to be empathetic dad. Okay, I see you're upset. Maybe we can try again later. And that maybe doesn't accomplish my goal, which then adds another layer to pretexting, which is ego suspension. I have to be willing to say that maybe right now my goals won't be achieved because of the other person's emotional content. And
Mhm.
all of that involves pretexting to the right way.
Yeah. So, it's so interesting as you shared that story. I was thinking about this from the child's perspective as well, is that they also pretext. They know how to come to mom and
Yeah.
to dad very differently in order to get the
Oh,
20
yeah.
bucks or to get the
Oh,
keys to
for
the
sure.
car.
Yes, that happens to me. Oh, I'm the weak one, by the way. So she knows how to play me. It's 100% true.
Yeah. And as long as you mentioned staying in it, breaking that trust. If you became the angry dad or they became the angry child when they didn't get what they wanted, then you go, oh, there was an ulterior motive. And then the
Yeah.
next time they come to you, that trust is already broken and they have more work to do.
Yeah. I love it because I remember when my daughter was little, she came to me and she said, um, mom said I can buy this doll if you say it's okay.
Hmm.
So I go, okay, let me just talk to your mom and I'll get back to you. And she's like, oh, you always have to talk to mom. I knew you would say that. And then I'm like, why are you so mad so fast? And I went and talked to mom, found out that was a complete lie.
Hmm.
So over a period of time, she figured out how to gain that. And she would come and say, after a while, hey, dad, I'm wondering if you and mom think it's okay if I buy this doll. I think mom would be okay because she's the one who showed it to me.
Uh-huh.
Oh, really good, right? And then I go, yeah, let me think about it. And she's like, okay, well, when you're done thinking about it, let me know. Stuck to pretext. And then I'm like, okay, I thought about it. We could do it right in that moment. She's like, okay, cool. And then she goes to mom and says, hey, dad said I can buy this doll, which I did. Can you help me with it with your credit card? And she's like, dad said yes. And then she's like, hey, did you say yes? Yep, I said yes. And now she gets it. And I'm like, she figured me out, man.
Oh my gosh.
I raised a
It,
little social engineer. It's terrible.
it's hilarious. Just to share equal stories. My son is the same way, growing up with a communication teacher, excuse me. When he was in his teens, he used to like call it out and say, oh, stop with the communication BS already.
Yeah.
But now that he's a little older, he's like, mom, this stuff really works.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I love
I
it.
know. My daughter uses nonverbals. She's been trained in that. It's great because I think, although we have to combat it as parents, it makes our children better adults and it makes them safer. People who know how to do the things like what your son can do or my daughter aren't as easy to fall victim to predatory behavior because they know how to communicate in a more adult manner and with more self-awareness. So I think it makes kids a better overall.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. Well, let's come out of the parenting zone and we could probably
Okay.
talk about our kids'
Yes,
stories
I'm
for a long
sure.
time. And let's come back into the workplace. How can we use pretexting in a workplace?
Yeah. So I'll give you a similar example. So, in our workplace, we use something called DISC profiling. So we use communication profiling tool for every employee. Every employee must take the test, and then all of our results go on the intranet, and anyone can see anyone's results at any time. And we do this because we want to learn how to communicate with each other better, right? So I'll give you the scenario. We have an employee that is not doing the job right, and we want to motivate them, right? So they haven't done something that deserves dismissal, right? We're not firing them. We want to motivate them to change their behavior, to do the things that we need them to do. So the first thing we do is we go and reread their DISC profile, and we see, okay, this person is a high I, which means that they're an influencer. They're outgoing. They like humor. They need the spotlight. They need some praise for the things that they do well. They're motivated by tasks that will be glory tasks, right? So we read all of that as management and we go, okay, so how can we motivate this person? So we say we need them to do this job that they haven't been doing fully, and we need to find out why first. And then if it is what we think it is, which is they're just not motivated because they find it boring, then we need to paint a new picture for them. So here's our
Mhm.
pretext. Instead of going in as angry boss saying, look, you're not doing the job right. This is your first warning. If you don't do it right, you're out. That's one choice. Will I get compliance? Maybe, out of fear of job loss, but I will not
Yeah.
get loyal compliance.
Yeah.
So next pretext is, again, empathetic boss. I want to find out first, why aren't you doing this? And then is there a way to motivate you to do it? So we go in with that conversation. We start off with we use the sandwich method. So the first slice of bread is hey, we really appreciate these things that you've done in the last 3 months. They've been really great for the team. We wanted to talk to you though about this task because it seems like, wow, as good as you are here, every time we assign you this, it like your hours really dip, and we're just trying to understand like why is that? Can you help us understand what is the problem motivating yourself to do this?
Mhm.
And then he'll say something, which this is, I'm telling you a true story. I just don't like it. It's just not the kind of job. I know every time I do it, it irritates me. I don't really find it fun. So then I end up waiting till last minute, and then I'm rushed and I have to get through it because the end of the day. Like, okay, so now it was the exact answer. So now we know communication profile says he likes those glory jobs. So we say, here's what I'm thinking. I really
Mhm.
need somebody that I can trust to train new people to do this task. And we had you in mind for that. But what we need to be a trainer is you need to be the best. Like you need to be the guy where like we can shine the spotlight on you and say you are the king of this task. And if I can't do that, then I can't put you as trainer, right? Because other people who are better will go, well, why did he get the trainer job if he, he's not as good as me at that? So is there a way that you think you can find the tools to motivate yourself for the next month to do it solid? So
Hmm.
I can assign you this trainer job because we're about to hire 3 or 4 people and I really need someone to take that role away from me because I'm so busy. And he's like, yeah, you know what? I think I can do that. I got some ideas for training too. Okay, awesome. So here's what I want you to do. Because right now is not the time for the ideas. I want you to do the task for the month 100%. Write down everything that you find frustrating and then come up with 3 ways that you found to make it less frustrating. And then that will become the training program for the next person that you will perform. And he's like, that's a great idea. Bam. Now he's doing it. Job
Hmm.
100%, and you have a person who will now be motivated to accomplish a task, and they're accomplishing it with the idea of not doing the job, but the goal is to become the trainer. The
Hmm.
job is secondary. We made the job the small detail in the pretext,
Oh, I love it. Boy, that's a
right?
gift that keeps on giving, that quote
Yeah.
that you got. Hey.
Yeah. I'm like, I told her, I said, I'm copywriting it and I own it now. Okay. Because it's beautiful, right?
Yes. Now, what I love about that is this sounds like a seasoned communicator who's been working with this stuff for a little while. Coming up with that kind of information requires a little bit of thought ahead of time, like really positioning yourself even before. So it's like the pretext to the pretext,
Yeah.
like thinking about what can I say to align with their motivating factors? Because when you laid that out, I'm like, wow, yeah, I'm signed, sign me up. I'll do that
Yeah.
task.
Yeah.
Right. But for somebody who's not, I mean, they've just kind of been blindsided with this
Yeah.
conflict. How do they position themselves to
Yeah.
utilize that kind of a process?
I think that's a great question because first of all, to put a spotlight on me, I am definitely not perfect at this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
When I get blindsided and I don't have time to prepare, there's a greater likelihood that I will answer in emotional content and not in pre-thought logic and plan.
Mm.
Um, and my standard communication profile is more like a drill sergeant than someone empathetic. So if I get blindsided, I'm more prone to do that. So for me, what I say is if something comes up, I always say, can we schedule to talk about this in an hour? Unless, of course, it's an immediate emergency. That then gives me time to do the mental prep. So my
Mm.
mental prep is the biggest task that any manager, boss, anyone can do is get in the mindset of ego suspension. Because if you can't suspend your ego during a conflict, then it's always going to be about you. It's always going to be about what you want, what your company wants, what's good for you. And that may not always be the case, right? So just this morning, someone on Twitter asked, like, how can you handle like a really tense situation, like let's say firing somebody, but leave them feeling better for having met you?
Great
And I
question.
said, well, that's a great question. So I said, that depends on the reason. I go, so in some cases, someone's not doing the job right, or they committed company theft or time theft or something really egregious. Then there is no leaving them feeling better for having met you. You have to go in, and what you can do though is you because they're not going to feel good. They're getting fired, right? But what you don't want to do is go in and just be like, listen, you are a terrible person. You did these horrible things, because we don't know the reasons why. And we may not care at that moment because the task is still going to be to get rid of them. Right. But what if the thing is different? What if they're just not good at the job? What if you have to get rid of them because you don't have the work, or they just don't fit the work you have, or they're just not a quality employee for your company? Then you can apply this method, because you could still go in and go, look, you don't fit here, so we're getting rid of you. But is there a way that you can support that person for a couple more weeks or a month to help them relocate to a new job? Is there a way that you can use these tactics to convince them non-manipulatively that the best thing for them is for them to exit the company and find a job elsewhere?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you can do that, isn't that using principles of influence with ego suspension? You're saying, man, I'm giving up like 2 more weeks of salary for someone we're going to fire. Yeah, you are. But isn't that better of an option, that you left someone feeling like they had a choice?
Mhm.
that during a world pandemic, that they're not out on the street looking for another job, that you cared enough to show them that you're willing to help them to the next step. And I understand that that's a hard ask when you're talking about a company that's got thousands of people that may have high turnover. So these ideas have to they have to be balanced with the person, right? The
Mhm.
person that you are talking to. Is this a right choice for the company or not? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But you can approach every situation with ego suspension. And if you do that, communication becomes so much easier when you suspend your ego.
It almost sounds human
Yes,
when
which we've
you,
lost that.
yeah.
We've lost that. I mean, think about it. We're in a world today where, and I'm not a political person and I don't care to talk about politics, but we're in a world today where we'll just take that topic for a second, that if you believe differently than I do, I have to hate you,
Mhm.
right? Because it's not enough that I can just say, well, Tammy and we believe differently. It's I have to hate you because you don't think the way I do. And your belief system is tied to you as a person. Where do we get this? Where does this become the case? Why can't we just have a different belief system, but still just be okay people? In my
Mhm.
company, we have people from every, and if you like, religious background known to man, from atheist to strict Christians. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it's like, so what? Can we work together? Can we get along? Isn't it okay that we don't have to all believe the same way just to work together? But that takes ego suspension on everyone's part,
Mhm.
because this society today, the ability to disagree without being disagreeable has almost been lost. And I bring it back to families as why it's so important for us to do this in our families, because that next generation is going to be the people in the workplace next. And if the only way they know how to resolve conflict is to jump on social media and start insulting someone,
Mhm.
imagine that in the workplace. You're
Mhm.
going to have, yeah, you're going to have a really horrible time.
Yeah, well, we see hangover effects from generations before, right?
Yeah.
So, as a nurse, for example, that's my background. I get all sorts of conversations and comments that are way outdated in terms of beliefs as to who should be seen first based on color and race and all sorts of stuff like that
Yeah.
still exists. So, for me, as you say, I think it's sometimes generational changes.
Yeah.
We're working with our kids today to make the changes for tomorrow.
And we have to.
Yeah, fascinating. Funny how it got back to kids.
I know. Sorry. I do that. I'm sorry. I
It's
like to
all good.
tie I like to tie the human hacking to every aspect of our lives, right? Because I find that for me, at least, when I was doing this just as a social engineer for work, I was really great at work, but then interpersonal relationships weren't so good. And I'm like, why am I so good at the job? But then when it comes to everything else, I seem to just suck. And it was
Mm,
like, what if I did the same thing I do at work, but I do it with my wife? Is that possible? Like at work, I'll ask someone a very direct question when I'm breaking into a place that allows them to think and give them an option, which feels very validating. So I implemented that with my wife, where I said she would come in to talk about something that was upsetting her. And I would say, hey, before you start, is this a Chris listen conversation or are you looking for a solution? And she would say, this is a listen conversation. And now what that did for me is I'm not sitting here hearing her, but thinking of how to solve it,
mhm.
which is how most of our arguments started.
Yeah.
She would just want to tell me something and I'd be like, but here's what you could do. And she's like, would you just listen to me?
Yeah.
So by applying the same principles I would do as a social engineer, I was like, wait, that just improved our relationship.
And it
And
allowed you to, if we tie it back to pretexting, it allowed you to assume the character and the role that you needed
exactly,
to assume
to
to
be
be
a better
effective.
husband in that point, right?
Yeah.
So if you do that at work, when you're doing with conflict resolution, and let's say you don't have the time, like you asked that question, what if you're blindsided and you can't take an hour to prepare? Then you could still go in to the conflict with that question in mind.
Hmm.
Like, hey, before we all start, I have a question. What is your perfect end result when we're done with this conversation? And if they can't answer, then we say, we can't start the conversation until you can tell me,
Hmm.
right? Because otherwise, I'll be sitting here not actively listening to you because I won't know what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So, and then if they're really stuck, say, well, what is your perfect resolution? Is it somebody's getting canned because you're mad at them? Is it you don't want to work here anymore? Is it you don't want to work for this person? You just want to complain and be heard? What is the perfect resolution for you right now? And if they can give you that, now handling the conflict becomes a better solution. Because let's say they go, I hate Tammy and I want her fired. Okay, well, I'm going to tell you up front before we start that I can be a listening ear, but we're most likely not going to get rid of Tammy because of this conversation.
She's
So if that's
amazing.
your yeah, she's amazing. And and we really like her. And we're not going to just get rid of her because of one conversation, but can we change the goal to where I actively listen to you? And then we set up another conversation to discuss any resolutions. Now, if they can accept that, now we have a conversation around conflict resolution
Mhm.
because we're both at the same goal. Where I see that conflicts never end at work is when I'm in this goal, I want Tammy fired, and I'm in this goal, I just want to listen to you to hear what the problem is, but our goals never meet
Mhm.
because I'm going this way and you're going this way.
Yeah,
So the conflict keeps getting wider and wider and wider as opposed to smaller because we're heading in different directions.
you're
Whereas
right.
if I can get you and me in the same direction, now we can probably meet in the middle somewhere and solve it.
Yeah, and I see this translating also into just colleagues as well. So we kind of talking about the supervisor and employee dynamic there, but even among your colleagues, and I have
Yeah.
been subjected to this many times. People come and sit because I teach communication. They come and just sit and they just start tearing
Yeah.
somebody else apart, and I'm like, whoa, you know.
Yeah.
So even with the colleagues, if you set the stage or kind of set the boundaries and ask that question about what is your goal here, what do you need, and then we can get into a more healthier
Yeah.
conversation. I can set some boundaries if it's going to be inappropriate, or I can guide you to talk to somebody else, or
Yeah.
like,
I love that.
yeah,
And
beautiful.
I always started off with a little bit of like ego suspending statement, like, look, here's my problem. I'm one of those problem solver guys. So whenever someone starts talking to me, I'm automatically thinking about resolutions. And you might just want someone that wants to listen right now. So can you tell me what is your perfect resolution from this conversation?
Yeah,
That way I can prepare my mind to be what you need.
yeah.
And sometimes that calms people down right away where
Hmm.
they're like, oh, you're actually like are going to listen here. And I'm like, well, as long as you tell me the goal, I just need to know what is the end goal. And I've seen that work wonders with people. And
I love
sometimes
it.
people are just angry, and
Yep.
I love your resolution, which is I may not be the right person right now, so we should find you the right person to talk to about this.
Hmm.
Sorry
Yeah.
to cut you off.
No, no. I just think we're so passionate about this,
Yeah,
both of
we
us, that
are.
we have a lot to contribute.
Yeah, I agree.
I wrote down three things to summarize our short conversation. We could talk for hours, and I
We
know,
could.
yeah, that's not the goal of today's session. Um,
I love that. You right away applied it. Man, using my own words. You're good.
but thank you. I did write down three key things. So one is I wrote down gap time, and that was either to prepare ahead of time, or if you're blindsided, take the time, find the space, create the space so that you can then come in authentically. Two is to consider and plan. Consider your audience in that gap. What is it that you know about them, and how can you um, influence them? I love the conversation around pretexting and the examples that we gave. And then three is if you don't know, is ask so you can set the stage.
I love it. Great roundup points. They're beautiful.
Awesome. I so appreciate you coming and joining us on this journey of helping the world become better and giving people strategies to dissolve conflict before it even becomes an issue. Like really think about it ahead of time. Now, I know we've got the book. We want to put a link in so people can buy the book. And I can't remember if we talked about if there was a download or a resource or some way that it can connect with you outside of that book.
There is. So the website humanhackingbook.com, there's a resources tab. It's completely free to sign up for it. But in there, I put a lot of extra resources throughout the book. Like there's a lot of pictures and you can never get them in color. So I put all the pictures in the book in color up there. I put worksheets for people to do what you and I just talked about. Like there's a worksheet for the final chapter about working through a conversation, planning your pretext, what emotional content you can actually fill out. And I filled one out for my daughter, the one I used on my daughter, and I put it up there so people can go and see, okay, this is what goes there. This is how it works. And then there's a section where they can actually communicate back and forth with me. Like say, I have a question on this chapter, or I don't know what this is supposed to do. And I answer those points. So they can go to humanhackingbook.com and get into the resources section and chat with me there, or
Awesome.
LinkedIn or Twitter too, either
Yeah,
one.
we'll make sure we put a link below so people can definitely access. I had noticed that in your book, in the audio version, you had referenced it. I don't know if it's in the text one because I'm doing the Audible one. But yeah, I had noticed that I'm like, oh, there's extra content. I was so
Yes.
excited.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us some fabulous tips.
Thank you.